All right, welcome back everyone to today's episode, and I'm joined with a couple fellow travelers, and we're talking about their basically travel nonprofit organization that they created about, well, I'll let you explain it, but yeah, I'm here at the villa. It's a little loud, so once again, bear with us with the background noise, but we've got cousins, we've got Chi and Sarah. We're gonna bring them out of here, and they're gonna introduce themselves. I've actually never interviewed two people at once, so this is gonna be an interesting dynamic, and it's just casual conversation about what they're doing. It's a really cool conversation about starting a nonprofit, which is what they've been working on, a passion project for the last 2 years. So welcome to the show, and come on out. Maybe if you want to start, who you are, where you're from, and what you're doing.
Sure. My name is Chi. I am from California, and I am the vice president of Trek Relief, which is the nonprofit that we're going to be speaking about today.
Awesome.
My name is Sarah. I'm from the U.S. I live in Seattle. It's beautiful, and I'm serving as the chief information officer for Trek Relief.
So what is Trek Relief? You kind of gave me a brief overview of it over lunch, and it sounds so cool, So I just wanted to kind of give you the platform to kind of share about it and all the huge impact you're making around the world with all what you're doing. So.
Sure, yeah. So Trek Relief is a nonprofit organization that was founded by our friend Candace Young, a total boss lady, if any of you guys know her. It was founded in response to the April 2015 earthquake in Nepal, which, if any of you guys know, over 9,000 people died because of that earthquake, and hundreds and thousands of buildings were decimated in Nepal. And Candace is also a hardcore backpacker traveler, and she was backpacking through the mountains, the Himalayas, and came across so much destruction that she was really moved to do something about it. So she decided to put her efforts towards increasing tourism in the Himalayas, again, giving business to the people in the mountains, the Nepalese people whose entire economy became built around trekkers.
Right.
And so she brought a lot of trekkers to Nepal, and since then, since the start of this nonprofit 2 years ago, our 2-year birthday was January 30th.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and since then, we've raised over $200,000 to date, which has helped rebuild over 61 structures, 12 of which are orphanages for children who are orphaned just by that earthquake, losing either one or both parents in the mountainside rubble and all of the aftershocks. And then now we're also working on a school in Nepal as well, which is a 3-year project. So yeah.
That's amazing. Like just to think in 2 years, which isn't a whole lot of time, to raise $200,000, and knowing how far that money can go in a country like Nepal, where the cost of living, you could do a lot with that. Like with some people in America, you might be thinking like, well, that's not even a house. But in underdeveloped countries like Nepal, third world countries, that can like really revolutionize like a village, and what you're doing with like building a school is amazing. I've got a friend, Taylor, who runs a nonprofit called Changemakers, and they build schools all around the world. So I think that's amazing what you're doing. So how did you two kind of get involved with that? Like, what's your background? Because I know that your backgrounds are both very different than the nonprofit scene, but is this kind of something you had an idea and you connected with the founder to kind of get on board with? Like, how did the whole structuring of it go?
Well, what's really interesting about Candace's story too was that she wanted to bring people into these areas that not a lot of people normally go to. It's not the most popular places to go trekking, which is why they needed the relief even more so.
Right.
So it's these areas where you can really only access them by foot. And so she had the idea to bring more tourism into these areas. And then at first, enlisting just her friends, because she was just one person.
Right.
Not even knowing that she could make this difference. So it was a matter of, hey, would you like to go to this beautiful valley that not a lot of people go to because it's not Annapurna, it's not Everest,
Right.
but go on this trek, support these people that I've met, and I want to build something there. And so we were one of the first people to go on one of her coordinated trips to go through the region and meet with the community leaders that she had been speaking to about this. And while we were there, we were incredibly inspired about what went on, loved the work, loved the trek itself and the trip, and ultimately worked together with her to build it into something more when she decided, let's make it a real thing.
Right.
So we've created a board of directors, which we're a part of, enlisted a few more people, and have obtained official 501c3 status in the U.S. as a nonprofit tax exempt organization, so that we are able to get more funds, more donations, or more presence even as an official organization to be able to do this type of work.
Right. Well, that was going to be my next question. Like I've got friends that have talked about starting a nonprofit. So like from the first thing that needs to be done, like what, if someone has an idea, what is the kind of process to go through getting that set up? I don't know if you did that or if she did that or if you know about it, you've done it. Yeah.
We did it together.
Okay, cool. It's a pretty challenging thing, right?
There are a lot of steps to go through, a lot of paperwork, a lot of legalities. Yeah. I think number one, it's perseverance and passion, because otherwise it'd be hard to face all the difficulties you might encounter in going through paperwork, for example, and enlisting the right people to help you figure that process out. We are all new to this.
Right, yeah. Right.
What's great is I think we've proven that it can be done regardless of your background, which actually I meant to get back to your other question about what we do and how it's different. But I would just like to say we all come from vastly different backgrounds. No formal experience in even running business or nonprofit, at least in this capacity. But we've somehow managed to figure it out and pull it together.
So that's awesome. So do you want to kind of share what your backgrounds are? Like, it's pretty awesome what you're doing. I know you're a big hiker and you're a big traveler, so you've got a pretty sweet situation that allows you to do both and earn a living. So if you want to share what you're up to.
Sure. It wasn't always like that. I just recently started traveling abroad, working remotely. I was working remotely prior to this back in Seattle. I work as my main line of focus is to direct engineering systems and business operations. I've been working in aerospace for a decade now, actually.
Just working for NASA and aerospace technology, not a big deal. It's just,
But I love nature. I love hiking. I trek a lot. And I also believe that if there's one place in the world that could use a lot of technical aspects or technological advances, it would be the nonprofit world. Especially in terms of systemic processes and procedures and making sure that we're compliant and within regulation and all the things I would do for aerospace, I would love to translate it over to nature and nonprofits.
So we've got an aerospace genius and we have...
Yeah, and my background is actually nonprofit work. So I went to UCLA for nonprofits, studied international development studies and global studies and public health. And so that's why when Candice actually first sent out so the way she started was this totally grassroots effort. She emailed a small group of her friends and said, hey guys, I want to put together a trek. Is anybody interested in coming? Your funds will be, donated to the local communities. And I was the first person who jumped on and said, yes, let's do it. And obviously Sarah came along as well, and she's also super passionate about it. So mostly nonprofit, and now I'm doing real estate investing. And so my goal is to have a career that actually gives me financial freedom and time to be able to do nonprofit work for free and basically open up my own foundation eventually. So
what kind of foundation would you like to open?
I actually would like to open up and build and construct communities that would house sex trafficked victims and survivors. So both women and children and, men, but I would love to have both women and children, because then the women could understand what the children went through and basically create an environment where they feel safe and they can thrive. Because in a lot of these developing countries, once a lot of sex trafficked victims don't even try to escape, because they know that if they do, they won't be taken back in by their families or their communities. They're seen as, for lack of a better word, I don't know, untouchable or not desirable, just dirty now. And creating these communities, I've seen this other awesome nonprofits do the same thing, where they create these communities that allow them to feel safe and secure, and also be able to have education and crafts and trades that allow them to re-enter society on their own and not have to depend on anybody else.
That's so huge, especially if you look at actually when I was in university, I was working with a nonprofit that was like working with at-risk youth. So youth that were into drugs or coming from really unsafe family backgrounds, and a lot of them were like in foster homes and stuff. And the thing that really was so heartbreaking about that is like we would set up these programs, and it would all be dependent on the funding from the government. So if the funding got cut, then we're like, sorry, we can't have this community center for you anymore, where you can come and spend time and like do these productive, healthy activities like sports and art and music that we had set up. So every cycle was like, well, can we stay open because of the funding, you know? So I think that with nonprofits, the real challenge with all these great ideas and great initiatives is having funding. So if you're able to self-fund it through your bling bling real estate, you know, that's really a really solid way to go about building something.
That's literally exactly why I'm doing this the way that I'm doing it. Because
so cool.
because I've worked in nonprofits for years, and that was the one thing that after a while I was just like, okay, and even, you know, I've had conversations with Candace and other people on the board. I actually am, that's why I'm doing it. I the one thing that I wanted to skip was having to ask everybody else for funding and money, because that is not sustainable. You know?
Well, even if you have a sustainable business model, like my friend that I mentioned earlier that had the Change Heroes, that was building all these schools, basically each person would raise $10,000 themselves through their networks or through their business endeavors, and then they would build a school, and then the organization would take like a small percentage of that to run the programs and just the cost of admin and stuff. But they ended up going bankrupt because it just was really hard with these small profit margins. Even for a nonprofit, it has to have some kind of profit to put back into the system to keep it sustainable. So I think that's a challenge with a lot of these.
And actually I will say, I'll take back what I said earlier where I said it's not sustainable. That's just my approach to it. There's tons of nonprofits out there that are able to make it very sustainable.
So. I know a big one a lot of my friends donate to is Charity Water. I think. That's really big,
doing
right?
So well.
So their whole model is they don't put any money
towards admin.
That all comes from private investors that kind of get behind it. And 100% of all the donations go right to the project, right?
So that's actually our inspiration, and we're actually most of the way there. A big part of us achieving that official 501c3 status was so that we could properly get big money funding from corporations and other types of sponsorships. So that could cover what very little admin costs we do have, very tiny. But ultimately, our model is to provide a platform for our participants as well to collect and raise or provide funds that goes almost completely to the projects and their travel there. So it's in our own way a sustainable version that's at a smaller scale that allows it to become more sustainable, I should say, at this time, following the premise of Charity Water to get the sponsorship for all of the other things that we need to make it run and to create bigger and better projects, which we're always working on.
No, that's so cool, because especially when you have a passion project like this, there's a lot of, how long has this been around for?
2 years, exactly.
So it started 2 years. Okay. That's good, because I see a lot of people saying, oh, I'm going to start this nonprofit, and then you'll see them pump it up for a couple months, and then it just kind of dies out. So to have something that's kind of long-term and solid and stable is it's awesome. In 2 years, it's like off to a great start. What you've done so far.
I think the key thing is having a visionary, which would be our founder Candace, but two, a team that is able to support that, and we just feed off of each other. You know? So.
Well, that's the thing, like I think that having any kind of successful startup or anything, you need to have that solid foundation of people that believe in the vision. They're like dialed into the long term, because if you just have something that's, well, let's try this out, first challenge, first roadblock, people bail out, so having that core foundation is really important.
It's all about the follow through, for sure. It's we also make sure to create that type of environment for us that keeps ourselves motivated, because we get discouraged too. So we actually try to meet in person, because we're all spread out across the US. I mean, once a year, just to connect and to dream big and to make things happen. But then we'll also host events for the community, whether it's to go on hikes locally or just to have fundraising parties that are just pure fun, and spread the message. Like, all these things really help towards keeping that dream alive. I think that's really important, and we've learned that that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good to mix business and pleasure and work with people you enjoy spending time with, and to have an excuse to get together for sure. It's also really important for the team, but also to go and connect with friends that you haven't seen because you're all spread out and stuff. So I
Yeah.
think nowadays with this whole nomadic digital uh, lifestyle of working abroad, it makes projects like this a lot more feasible and easier to follow through with. So, and you two are traveling together in Bali as cousins.
Yeah.
Any stories you want to share about your trip here so far?
I mean, we're meeting each other up because we've got these separate travel plans, and
Yeah,
it's like a honeymoon.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. Yeah.
it's nice.
I guess one of the highlights of our trip, if anybody goes to Bali, would be to take a few days to go to Nusa Penida, which I hope you're able to make it because
Yeah,
it's
looks
wonderful, wonderful there. Yeah.
Some beautiful nature out there, and if you're into nature like we are,
Yeah.
yes.
Any good hikes to recommend? Have you found, or is it mostly just beaches?
Well, everybody recommended to go to Lombok and hike Rinjani, but we're here at the wrong time. It's rainy season, and there were just earthquakes, so all the trails are closed. I'm super bummed. So when
Yeah.
I'm traveling, I want to be hiking or finding projects and things to do. Actually, it could be a good trip relief project.
Yes.
There's earthquake aftermath to deal with,
Mhm.
but haven't found any yet. So I think right now we're just chilling in Bali and enjoying the life here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what you said is really important because I don't really watch the news. It's always, I call CNN constant negative news. So I just like try and block all that out. But what you do see, I see all my news through social media basically, and you see these big relief efforts when, like this was how long ago? 3 years ago?
April 2015.
4 years now, almost.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
but 4 years ago, and I remember seeing that like all over social media, like pray for Nepal, all that. But then after that, you just hear nothing,
Yes.
right? But these countries are
Yeah.
still in total turmoil,
Yes.
and you see that in just all these big, huge industries where they're just destroyed.
Yeah.
You hear about it for 2 weeks, not even, and then it's just out of sight, out of mind. But
Yeah.
these communities and cities are still just devastated, and it's been years that are still needing development, right? Like it's not just something that you can turn a switch and everything goes back to normal. Like it's a huge
And that's why our work
deal.
is continuing. And
Yeah.
also that's why this really came about.
Yeah.
Was when Candace had found these grief-stricken areas,
Mhm.
they were the areas that said, we did not see any of the government funding. What are you talking about? And that was a very key part of all of this, was to know that sometimes we don't know where the money's really going.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does go, but oftentimes it's not enough anyway.
Yeah.
So this is our grassroots approach of bringing in money directly without that middleman,
Yeah.
without knowing or not knowing where it's coming from or where it's going through. Just bringing in people.
Yeah, it's a great way to know exactly where your money is going. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's exactly why Candace decided to found this, because she was trekking there 2 years after the earthquake,
Yeah.
and she said none of these areas have seen any relief
Right.
except for the occasional helicopter that dropped off food and water.
Right.
But that was still so few and far between. It wasn't enough. People were walking in flip-flops or barefoot on rocks and rubble and snow
For days.
and they were living out of tents made out of clothes, whatever clothes they had, in the
Wow.
freezing Himalayan mountains.
I mean, granted, they're hardy and they can do it, but
Yes.
that's not their ideal. Or we'd want to support that if we can.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what they did see, or what she did see, was that the big cities would get more of the relief, which
Yeah.
gets the priority usually. Like Kathmandu
It's a little
had
bit.
been rebuilt for sure, but then about everyone else who was hard to get to, such as the valley and the mountains,
Yeah.
they weren't seeing.
And
Yeah.
then places like Kathmandu also have much more media coverage, right? So the money will be spent there.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap this up, someone wants to go trekking to Nepal. What should they do? What should they know? How to prepare? What would you suggest?
Oh yeah, definitely. So actually, Sarah,
I mean, our website is a great resource,
Yeah.
even if you're not going to go on a trip with us.
Mhm.
But we'll have preparation checklists and just things to get you ready mentally, emotionally, and physically, especially with altitude. Even if you're not going up to Everest, for example, you could still be going up to very high valleys. And understanding cultural traditions, those things. We have nice snippets. So if you go to trekrelief.org, it's all there, but you can also take a look at our projects and our trips. And we not only support Nepal at this time, but we've more recently started to support Mongolia, which is a beautiful, untouched landscape. One of the few, least populated places in the world right now. Still, but is developing. So if you also love that type of landscape, lots of animals and natural beauty, and want to do some environmental stewardship there, because they're at a pivotal point in which they understand they may have a waste management problem if they don't do something about it now. So they've reached out to ask for advice, basically, and support from places who've experienced it, or who have solutions. So we work together with their local Rotary clubs and their leaders to implement waste bins and waste management systems and education in the schools for kids on just recycling and why would you do that and the impact that it has. So Mongolia is another great trip that we offer too. All on the website, so trekrelief.org.
That's awesome. We'll definitely have that linked up here below. And I think that Nepal is like been on my bucket list for a long time. And it's so cool to kind of meet people that are actually doing a lot of good and offering a lot of value and service to help that community.
The people there are unlike people I've ever met anywhere else. And we've traveled a bit, and I think there's such a beautiful energy. I think anybody who's been to Nepal and to the Himalayas, all the villages, they will say that there's a very special energy that the people there carry with them, and you won't regret it.
And the mountains, so beautiful.
Well, one of my friends, Amy, what's up, Amy? Shout out to your restaurant, Bollywood in Busan. He just spent a month there, and I could just see such a difference in him before he left. Was just kind of like all tense and stressed, and coming back, he just had this like aura of just like radiance. And I'm like, I want that.
Yes.
And
so everyone who goes to Nepal gets touched in some way or other. It's a pretty magical place.
Well, there you have it, folks. Go check out Nepal. Support, check out what these fine, very intelligent and well-traveled and change makers are doing in a area that is really kind of not forgotten, but in a way it's kind of been, the spotlight isn't on it anymore, but it still definitely needs assistance and support. So so people can reach out to either of you on the website. I'll have that link below. And anything else you'd like to wrap up before we kind of close off here?
No, just thanks for listening. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out at www.trekrelief.org.
And follow us on Instagram. We've got some beautiful travel photos from our travelers as well.
Yeah, at trekrelief.
Absolutely. And I'll have your personal accounts linked below as well. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. I'll post this up on the podcast soon. And if you like it, once again, share it with a friend and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace from Bali.